All right. Hello, everyone. We are on our next video. This is going to be a critique. So we're in chapter 3 right now. Um, and chapter 3 is talking about evaluating a company's external environment. Sounds simple enough. We're going to watch a video, and this will be my first critique or response video. Um, I want to watch it together with you. I would say it's a positive critique, but a critique nonetheless. And I'm going to try to watch it with you on this Zoom recording, and pause it from time to time, and then make some comments. So let me make sure I'm not on anything inappropriate. All right. Captain's log. Nope, nope, we're not going to do that. Share. Now I got to slow down here. I share this, optimize for video sharing. Okay, let's try it. I'm crossing my fingers. It's only a 9-minute video, so I'll pause it from time to time. Let's do it. This is from Roger Martin, Professor Emeritus at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. One of the reasons I like this video is um, Dr. Martin talks about the difference between planning and strategy. And one of the issues that I kind of struggle with is that when you read a textbook, especially, and you read our textbook and you read my org management textbook, you go through it and you read it and you don't stop for a second and say, well, wait a minute, what do I really understand this? Am I like strategic planning, for example, we talked about or strategic, the words get used interchangeably. Talks about setting up a vision, a mission, and all of those types of things. That's great, but anytime I've worked with organizations that are trying to develop these, a lot of the time I realize that people are coming up with like to-do lists. They're not talking about an actual strategy. And Dr. Martin discusses that in his video that was shared on Harvard Business Review. So let's just get started.
This thing called planning has been around for a long, long time. Well, people would plan out the activities they're going to engage in. More recently,
How about we turn down the speed a little bit? Sorry, sometimes I have to watch these quick.
has been a discipline called strategy. People have put those two things together to call something strategic planning. Unfortunately, those things are not the same, strategy and planning.
Okay, as we said before, actually, let me pull this up. I'm hoping you're seeing right now that master strategy and tools. So, chapter 2 gets into developing a mission, a vision, and value statements. And that sounds fine when you look at it and when you read it. But when you understand what strategy really is in business or in management for that matter, your plans are not strategy. Okay. Strategies involve the relationship between buyers and producers and sellers. And um, it's not, that's what frustrates me is it's like, hold on. Developing a mission and actually knowing what a strategy would be for the mission requires that you understand a bunch of other topics or issues before you even get there. All right. Hopefully this works.
So just putting them together and calling it strategic planning doesn't help. What most strategic planning is in the world of business has nothing to do with strategy. It's got the word, but it's not. It's a set of activities that the company says it's going to do. We're going to improve customer experience. We're going to open this new plant. We're going to start a new talent development program. A whole list of them, and they all sound good. But the results of all of those are not going to make the company happy because they didn't have a strategy. So what's a strategy? A strategy is an integrated set of choices that positions you on a playing field of your choice in a way that you win. So there's a theory. Strategy has a theory. Here's why we should be on this playing field, not this other one. And here's how, on that playing field, we're going to be better than anybody else at serving the customers on that playing field.
Okay. I apologize. I'm going to try to turn my microphone on and off because it's giving a lot of background noise. So when he's talking about this, this is what I was trying to share with you when we talked about value disciplines and core competencies and um, sustainable competitive advantages in those types of things. You're in the product life cycle. You're trying to understand in a relationship between all of those things internally, everything externally, and then usually with Porter's five forces and a pestle analysis, which is can be both internal and external. You're putting those together to understand, okay, how do we beat somebody else at this game? Or how maybe beat's not a good word. How do we try to figure out how to maximize our position given these sets of circumstances and constraints to achieve something?
That theory has to be coherent. It has to be doable. You have to be able to translate that into actions for it to be a great strategy. Planning does not have to have any such coherence. And it typically is what people in manufacturing want, the few things they want to build a new plant, and the marketing people want to launch a new brand, and the talent people want to hire more people. There tends to be a list that has no internal coherence to it and no specification of a way that that is going to accomplish collectively some goal for the company. See, planning is quite comforting. Plans typically have to do with the resources you're going to spend.
Okay, I wanted to stop there. So when he said planning, we're going to try to do this here. Planning, there's a psychological component to planning, and we don't talk about it very often. Um, and this gets into the understanding of anxiety. Okay. A lot of times we experience anxiety when something happens that is completely unexpected. Um, a husband that wakes up one morning and spouse says, "That's it, it's over, I want a divorce." And the husband had no idea. Everything seemed fine. They were going out on date night once a week, something like that. It, boom, you now your world just turned upside down because nothing, you got no warning signals. Here it comes. So one of the ways to act against that is to try to plan. And there's nothing wrong with trying to plan. Companies should do that, managers should do that, executives should try to do that, leaders should try to do that. You're trying to set a plan in order to kind of predict what do we think is going to happen next and what actions can I take to maximize my position. I actually teach this when we go through negotiation tactics and techniques is we try to figure out, especially if you work with these people and you're trying to, it's very common to have a negotiation in the world of employment, in business, in management, in organizational management, in all of those places. If you've worked with somebody else, you as a human being possess the ability to kind of try to predict once you know someone what their reaction will be to a certain topic or issue that gets introduced. So knowing that, what I actually coach people to do is sit down and try to have that conversation in your head, or even way better than that, find a good friend that's really a smart friend and sit down with them and then try to play out the negotiation before you ever walk into the room. Then, very often, draw a few circles here to show you how to do this. I'm sure you've seen these bubble diagrams before. When you're in a negotiated position like that, Hopefully we can get that in here and I can still see. You have a bubble diagram and you say, okay, here's the problem. What dealing with this person in this scenario, what are all the things that could happen? What direction could this go? And once you write that down, even if you don't get what you want, you reduce your anxiety because you've tried to figure out what could happen here. So, I used to deal with an employee that was very right-brained. It was constant for me to try to kind of figure out where would they go in a circumstance because I'm very left-brained. So when I was dealing with them, I would talk with my wife and I would talk with a good friend of mine and say, okay, here out of this situation, dealing with this problem, how is this person going to react? And even as a right-brained person, I could look and figure out a list of different ways they could react. So if this employee would react in this direction, then I could counter it with, okay, if that's how you would like to do it, here are some issues that you might run into, but maybe if we uh, change it by a little bit, then we could make it happen. And that way, I could walk into a room with this person and feel very confident and comfortable because I had planned ahead. I had tried to come up with all of the things that could happen in this conversation. I want to bring that up because managers will do that all the time, and people that uh, when they want to overplan, especially, it's often because they're trying to reduce their own anxiety. So when you see people doing strategic planning, even though a strategy and what they're calling a strategic plan are not probably the same things, understand they're not doing it to make everybody miserable or to try to control things they don't control. It's they're trying to reduce the anxiety. They're trying to figure out, well, what could happen next. So planning is not a bad thing. But when you're talking about a strategy, it is way more multifaceted. All right, now we're going to try to share this again. See if I can get everything. All right.
So we're going to build a plant. We're going to hire some people. We're going to launch a new product. Those are all things that are on the cost side of businesses. Who controls your costs? Who's the customer of your costs? The answer is you are. You decide how many square feet to lease, how many raw materials to buy, how many people to hire. Those are more comfortable because you control them. A strategy, on the other hand, specifies an outcome, a competitive outcome that you wish to achieve, which involves customers wanting your product or service enough that they will buy enough of it to make the profitability that you'd like to make. The tricky thing about that is that you don't control them. You might wish you could, but you can't. They decide, not you. That's a harder trick. So that means putting yourself out and saying, here's what we believe will happen. We can't prove it in advance. We can't guarantee it. But this is what we want to have happen and that we believe will happen. It's much easier to say, I'll build a factory, I will hire more people, etc., than I will have customers end up liking our offering more than those of competitors.
Okay, we're going to jump again back to our master strategy tools thing. Because when we talk about a strategy, you begin to understand the launch, the growth, the maturity, and the decline, and what strategy is, because you're often launching new products. You're trying to come up with things when there's no evidence that this may work. So you don't know. So you try to control that which you can control, which is often, well, for leaders and managers, they try to control people, places, and things, and that's, when you're in charge, that's in your purview when you're running a company. But I love what I believe it's Dr. Martin is saying here is A strategy gets into the unknown. It gets into that which you don't control, and you don't control revenue. One of the issues I find with students, and especially actually MBA students, um, when we talk about business, is a question, and we actually talk about this in personal finance too. Do you control your income? You as an individual, you're getting ready to graduate college here pretty quick. You're going to probably go out and get a job. And one of the questions I'll ask students in personal finance is, do you control the amount of money you're earning? And the answer is inevitably no. You don't write your own paycheck. Somebody else cuts a check, they give it to you, they sign it, you go cash it, but you're not in control of that per se. You may have influence on it, but you don't have control. Well, the same thing is true in business. When you come out with a new product line or a new service line, you, you don't know if it's going to work. It could be the best, most awesomest, phenomenal plan ever conceived, and it still may fall flat. Okay, let's keep going.
The tricky thing about planning is that while you're planning, chances are at least one competitor is figuring out how to win. When U.S. air carriers were busily planning, what routes to fly and there was this little company in Texas called Southwest that had a strategy for winning. And, at first that looked largely irrelevant because it was tiny. What Southwest Airlines was aiming for was an outcome. What they wanted to be is a substitute for Greyhound, a way more convenient way to get around at a price that wasn't extraordinarily much greater than a Greyhound bus. Southwest said everybody else is flying hub and spoke. They have hubs and they fly hub and spoke. We're going to fly point to point so that we don't have aircraft waiting on the ground because you only make money when you're in the air. We're going to only fly 737s, one kind of aircraft, so that our gates are set up for those, our systems are set up for those, our training, our simulations are set up. We're not going to offer meals on the flights because we're going to specialize in short flights. We're not going to book through travel agents. We're going to encourage people to book online because that's less expensive for everybody and more convenient. So their strategy ended up having a substantially lower cost than any of the major carriers so that they could offer substantially lower prices. Because it had a way of winning, it got bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger, and then bigger, and bigger, and bigger, and bigger, until it flies the most passenger seat miles in America. The major carriers were not trying to win against one another. They were all playing to play, as I say. They were playing to participate. Maybe buy more planes, get more gates, maybe grow some, not having a theory of here's how we could be better than our competitors. And that was fine until somebody came along and said, here's a way to be better than everybody else for this segment. And so that segment then goes. It's gone, and the main playing to play players have to share a smaller pie that's left over after Southwest takes whatever share it wants.
Absolutely love that comment and love that analogy. And now hopefully if this video is working, let's go back here to our diagram. This is the point, is when we're talking about a business or an organization that is in an environment where resources are constrained, and virtually everybody is in a scenario where resources are constrained, either capital or raw materials or customers. There's just only X amount of customers. You're playing to win a game. That means you have a launch or growth, a maturity, and a decline. Is you're constantly trying to figure out, how do we get back on top? What do we need to do strategically? And the reason that's happening is when we look at almost every company, I just have not seen a company that started, stop the share here, that started with a, I don't know, $100 billion in capital, and then it went out to go do something, and it had this $100 billion, so it could do whatever it wanted to do, and then it was wildly successful, and it turned into a $5 trillion company. That's not how the game works. The game is over a series of time, and you start at a certain level, at a launch phase or a small level, and your goal is to grow and to get bigger and become more competitive. And for lack of a better word, because I don't like it when I say this, but I just don't have a better way to explain it quickly, is you're gaining power, the ability to do things that maybe others can't do. Um, when we look at Amazon, Amazon did not start off as a $500 billion behemoth online sales organization. It started as a $10 million online sold textbooks because that had huge profit margins. Um, that's how they started. And then they figured out, how do you get good at this? And they kind of got good at that. And their value discipline was customer intimacy when they started. And then they kept growing and growing because there was room to grow, because there was like a monopoly on used textbooks, and it was you before, you either got it at a university or you got it, if you were lucky and you lived in Minneapolis. There were a couple of retail outlets that bought and sold used textbooks, but other than that, there wasn't really anything there. So that's how they started. Again, they didn't start as a behemoth. So when you think about it that way, and we go back, then you're always having to observe this life cycle of growing, maturing. If you're doing it right and you're doing it well, like Amazon, then you start here with the first product or first idea. And then at some point, when that gets funded enough and there was enough demand, well, then you go to the next thing. Maybe you start off with some products and services, and then you keep growing and launching the new and improved. When you're doing it, it's a strategy. You're trying to win the ultimate game here, and to become bigger and bigger and get more and more resources to grow bigger and bigger. That's the name of the game. And if you're not doing that, and you're not thinking about it strategically, then here's what ends up happening is you get into the decline phase and you just keep declining. Sometimes companies, if they're large enough, will sell out to another company. Right now, I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen with J.C. Penney's and maybe like Men's Warehouse. Is there going to be how is that going to have to adapt in shape and be different than it is today? If they can't be, they may sell J.C. Penney's to a private equity firm that thinks they have a good idea, or a hedge fund or a mutual fund that thinks they have the managerial expertise to go in and relaunch and try it again. And in that process, you often get this figure eight diagram where you go into crisis because you don't know what else to do. Then things are confusing because you don't know what the future needs to be successful. So then you kind of have to transform. Maybe you go from being a J.C. Penney's and you turn into a Men's Warehouse, or Men's Warehouse becomes, they grow and they grow and they grow and they say, well, what's the next thing we can do? I don't know. Let's go buy J.C. Penney's and figure out how to meld that into how we're doing things. What are we doing right? So, um, let's just keep watching.
If you're trying to escape this planning trap, this comfort trap of doing something that's comfortable but not good for you, how do you start? The most important thing to recognize is that strategy will have angst associated with it. It'll make you feel somewhat nervous because as a manager, chances are you've been taught you should do things that you can prove in advance. You can't prove in advance that your strategy will succeed. You can look at a plan and say, well, all of these things are doable. Let's just do those because they're within our control, but they won't add up to much. In strategy, you have to say, if our theory is right about what we can do and how the market will react, this will position us in an excellent way. Just accept the fact that you can't be perfect on that and you can't know for sure. And that is not being a bad manager, right? That is being a great leader, because you're giving your organization the chance to do something great. The second thing I do is say, lay out the logic of your strategy clearly. What would have to be true about ourselves, about the industry, about competition, about customers for this strategy to work? Why do you do that? It's because you can then watch the world unfold, right? And if something that you say is in the logic that would have to be true for this to work is not working out quite the way you hoped, it'll allow you to tweak your strategy. And strategy is a journey. What you want to have is a mechanism for tweaking it, toning it, and refining it so it gets better and better as you go along. Another thing that helps with strategy is not letting it get overcomplicated. It's great if you can write your strategy on a single page. Here's where we're choosing to play. Here's how we're choosing to win. Here are the capabilities we need to have in place. Here are the management systems. And that's why it's going to achieve this goal, this aspiration that we have. Then you lay out the logic, what must be true for that all to work out the way we hope. Go do it and watch and tweak as you go along. That may feel somewhat more worry-making, angst-making than planning, but I would tell you that if you plan, that's a way to guarantee losing. If you do strategy, it gives you the best possible chance of winning.
All right. So, absolutely love that video, and I think it lays it out better than well, there's a reason that it's 2 years old and it has 5.6 million views on even Harvard Business Review is not a it's not a huge outlet, but 5.6 million views would tell you this gentleman is actually saying something. There's wisdom in what he's trying to communicate with the world that, and frankly, myself included, I have witnessed organizations that have taken up strategic planning and they are doing it exactly. In fact, many, maybe most, the majority of organizations I have worked with, when they go to do strategic planning, they're doing what he's talking about. They're planning and operating in the realm of what they can control. They're not actually they're not actually strategizing. The other point I would say to that, and I really do believe this, I think a component to folks not being able to strategize, and instead they're doing the planning trap, is because we operated in a world here until probably the last 20 years, 10 years, somewhere in there. We operated in a world where anytime we forecasted, we did so based on a growth rate of 3%. Okay. Every formula, every capital budgeting exercise, everything, all is set to increase with inflation or the consumer price index by about 3%. Well, the problem is we're operating now in a world where things are shrinking in the United States. The birth rate has plummeted. We've witnessed one other, I believe it's Japan, where they've stagnated now for like 30 or 40 years, and that changes things. So I think 20, 30, 50 years ago, when plans were made, it was based on the assumption that, well, we can't screw this up, or that we've never experienced what it would look like for it to screw up and blow up and fail. So we're seeing that a lot more than we did 30 or 40 years ago. So if you have a CEO that's 60 years old, they started their career at, let's say, 25, working at General Electric. General Electric, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, it was a very different behemoth than what it is today. And everything they were trying to do in their planning was based on, well, as long as people continue to buy light bulbs and jet engines, we should be fine. Well, what happens when you shrink? Do you need to go in a different direction? And how are you going to not make the mistake? The thing I want you to remember from this video and from this class and anything I'm trying to teach here is this idea of core competency. It's okay to go in a different direction. What's not okay is you're going into, and Dr. I want to say Martin, said it quite well that you need to write it down and look at the logic. If Walmart's executives sit down and say, guys, we got to start competing on customer intimacy and how do we improve our customer service? Somebody in the room should recognize, guys, we don't know how to do that. We've never done that. It's always been operational excellence and cost. That's how we've always operated. So hopefully when it gets written down on paper, somebody would stop and say, hold on here. We don't know how to do this. Walgreens maybe knows how to do that, or Lewis. Those are bad examples. But we know for sure Walmart doesn't know how to do it. So maybe that's not a logical uh, direction to go. Maybe we need to do it where we're harnessing our core competencies and those sustainable competitive advantages and those value disciplines. So let's go ahead and stop there. I didn't want to make a real long one, but I find myself getting very chatty when we do these videos. I hope they're not too painful, but who knows? Take care, and we'll see you in the next video, hopefully to hammer through chapter 3.